This is the West Virginia Capitol Report. Funding for the West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by Mark A. Hunt and Associates and by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host David Perry, and we've got a good show lined up today. It's the legislature has convened, David, as you know, begins with the governor's State of the State address, and then the legislature goes to work on a number of bills, certainly that impact and affect the citizens of the state of West Virginia. And it's also the time of year that interest groups, people trying to influence the legislative process, assemble. They've already put together their legislative priorities, and it's time for them to get serious about their lobbying efforts before the West Virginia legislature. And what we have lined up for this week's show is the AFL-CIO, which represents working families throughout the state of West Virginia, held their legislative conference in Charleston that they kicked off with a press conference at the Cultural Center in Charleston, which is part of the Capitol complex. And we had an opportunity to get in and talk to some people, but again, those organizations, it's an important time of the year because what occurs in the legislature affects a lot of people in the state of West Virginia.
As you've said, Bill, that day was a conference, the AFL-CIO and the different affiliates associated with it, at which time they announced their priorities and their legislative agendas for the session.
No doubt about it. And again, some of the organizations have sort of expanded the scope of their representation. I think, for example, the AFT had traditionally been an organization that represented the interests of teachers, but I think they've now expanded out to include a number of other public employees in the state of West Virginia. So, but again, those conferences are important because they have an opportunity to interact and interface with elected members of the West Virginia legislature to talk about the importance of the issues that really affect their affiliates and members in the legislature. And I know it's important to always listen to the interests and concerns of those organizations representing larger memberships in West Virginia.
And for the first time, this has seen both teacher organizations come together, the WVEA and the AFT, as well as the service personnel.
No doubt about it. Well, as it is just about every year, concerns usually start and end with the West Virginia state budget, which is the one part of public policy that absolute requirement that the legislature adopt a budget before they get out of town. And there's been some problems in the last few years with getting the budget done within the 60-day session, but beginning with the governor's State of the State address, it appears as if revenue collections have stabilized somewhat. We saw the governor with his whiteboard. Things have kind of gone from red to black as far as the projected availability of state resources necessary to deal with a lot of these unmet needs in West Virginia.
Of course, I also understand, Bill, this year for the first time that the majority party has indicated they want to finish the budget within the regular legislative session and not outside the legislative session.
Well, no doubt we'll just have to kind of stay tuned and see whether they can pull that off or not. But getting into our show that we have lined up for you today, we had the opportunity to talk to three leaders really in the area of representing working people in West Virginia. We had a chance to talk to Dale Lees, who's the president of the WVEA, the largest teacher organization in the state of West Virginia. Also Christine Campbell, who represents the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT. In addition to Josh Sword, who is the current president of the West Virginia AFL-CIO. So, it was good to talk to those people to get a sense of what their priorities are and what they see upcoming in the West Virginia legislature. So the first of our interviews was with Dale Lees, and again, he is a professional educator. I believe worked as a classroom teacher in Mercer County, I believe.
Correct.
And again, education is something that's interconnected in West Virginia. We may think it's in the classroom, chalkboards and books and those types of things, but education goes in a lot of different directions in West Virginia, and there's a lot of interconnected ways in which education really impacts and affects economic development in the communities in which we live. Obviously, folks want to live in communities that have good public school systems. The education of children are leaders of tomorrow. So we all have a vested interest in public education. But as far as that interconnection between public education and economic development and moving our state forward, let's take a second and see what Dale Lees had to say about that.
Well, it's important to understand that the working families and the kids of the state of West Virginia are our most valuable resource, and the things that we're doing to them is just harmful. When we have over 700 classroom vacancies, we're doing harm to children's education, because our children's learning conditions are our employers, our teachers' working conditions. And to be able to do that, we have to decide, is education a priority in this state? If you want a true economic developer, then education is the way to do that. What message does it send to companies to say, well, let's go to West Virginia. They only have 727 vacancies in their school system. People are not going to come like that. What would it say if, let's come to West Virginia. Not only do they not have any vacancies, but they have programs, they have incentives, they have electives, so that our students are ready as soon as they graduate to go into that job immediately.
Well, again, some important points made by Dale Lees, and again, recognizing the importance of education, the interconnectedness between public education and what we try to do to move this state forward. I think Dale was right on point.
I think Dale emphasizes that education should be a priority, and that it doesn't always receive the priority that it should for sometimes. Sometimes we focus on issues that are not primary to education, such as the Tim Tebow bill, the education savings accounts, and those issues that are not relevant to moving education ahead in West Virginia, such as common planning, salaries, diversity of curriculum, and so forth, Bill.
No doubt about it. And again, sort of a lot of things kind of clutter the landscape as far as people's priorities in the West Virginia legislature. But again, Dale makes the point that it's important for us to understand the priority that education plays in West Virginia. Let's roll that second clip and see what Dale has to say about that.
Well, we have to fix the problem by making education a priority. We throw money at everything in the world in an attempt to bring jobs to West Virginia, except the right thing. And if we were putting the money in education to build an already good system, then businesses will come. And secondly, we have to quit skirting around the issues. Our lawmakers are very good at doing a diversionary tactic. They want to have us discussion about Tim Tebow and education savings accounts and all these things that really doesn't make that much of a difference in our classroom, instead of discussing the major points of education on how to give teachers more quality time with their kids, how to give them adequate planning time, how to bring in electives into our classroom so that the kids have a diverse curriculum.
Dale makes an important point about prioritization of education in West Virginia as it relates to the classrooms and economic development. Bill?
Certainly does. And again, there's only so much time in a 60-day legislative session, so it's really important to line those issues up that really have the potential to impact public education in West Virginia. Well, Dave, the second person we had an opportunity to talk to during the conference was Christine Campbell, who is the current president of the West Virginia AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. And again, Christina, I think, makes a number of important points. First of which, the dialogue. What is it that we're going to be talking about during the 60-day session? Establishing what it is that we're going to be, talking about. What is it that we need to do? And again, how do we keep our teachers and people in West Virginia? People are attracted to occupations for a variety of different reasons, but it's important to keep our teachers in the classroom, our public employees at work, in public work projects throughout the state. So, what is it that we really need to do to keep these people on the job? Obviously, things like pay and benefits, salaries, those things are important. So, what is it we're going to talk about? Here's what Christine Campbell had to say about that.
Well, it's so important because we're talking about public education and public services. So we have to figure out a way to attract and retain and keep people who are already trying to stay here in West Virginia. And we can't do that when we are attacking employee rights, when we are not dealing with our health insurance costs going up every year, and offering, what we believe is at least a start to talk about it. But if a 1% pay raise is not even going to cover the increase in your health insurance, then how is that moving us in the right direction? What are we doing to keep people in West Virginia and to make sure that we have the services for our public and make sure we have the best education for our students?
Again, what is it that we need to do to satisfy and keep these folks working hard for the citizens of West Virginia? Obviously, pay and benefits are important. And again, in past few years, just the funds have not been available to address those long-term systemic needs that people have in terms of having competitive salaries, benefits. As we all know, PEIA costs have been escalating with medical inflation, some reductions in benefits that people have enjoyed in past years. Those are all part of the mix of what's being talked about in the halls of the West Virginia legislature. So, but again, we had the opportunity to continue to talk to Christine, Dave, about a number of other important issues.
Well, I think if we're talking about the people who actually have the power to do something about it in the legislature, then the leadership actually has to say, okay, so we're going to start by not talking about privatizing public education. We're going to start by not talking about taking away people's seniority rights. Like job security is a reason to stay here. We're going to talk about where can we get a long-term funding stream to deal with this health insurance crisis. Where can we get a long-term funding stream to significantly increase pay? We have people making $5,000 to $20,000 more for teacher salaries just in the states around us. If we can say we're going to identify and maintain a funding stream like we did with our retirement system, then we see that commitment and we know that they're truly prioritizing public education and public services in West Virginia.
Bill, Christine talked about leadership in the West Virginia legislature and how important it was in determining what we talk about. And she talked about long-term funding. And of course, when we look at long-term funding, we know it's very important because West Virginia has gone from being 49th in terms of teachers to number 37. West Virginia has gone from having 44% of its budget down to about 37% of its budget dedicated to public education. So as she emphasized, I think it's very important we talk about a long-term funding source.
And again, a lot of what both Dale Lees and Christine talked about is, sort of setting the agenda. And you and I both had the opportunity during our tenures as members of the legislature to serve on the Senate Finance Committee, or pardon me, the Senate Education Committee and the House Education Committee. And as we both know, it is the chairman. It's a leadership-driven process, but the chairman sets the agenda. So, really in answer to the question, what are we going to talk about? I learned by experience that we talk about exactly what the chairman wants us to talk about, which is largely the product of the leadership structure in both the House of Delegates and the state Senate. So, again, I'm sure that that the folks representing the interests of working families, public employees, and teachers in the state know that it's important to sort of dig in and get the ear of the legislative leadership that's represented by the majority party to try to get their issues on the table.
Of course, they also, Bill, have to be very closely in touch with their constituents. And as you know, the WVA, AFT, and AFL-CIO have been holding meetings throughout the state to talk about what their action plan is in order to achieve their objectives of PEIA, raises, CNPs, diversity of curriculum, and so forth. And many of those are meeting tonight. 10 counties I know have had meetings, and we know Wyoming and Logan County have talked about a sick-out day. So they have to be in tune with those memberships throughout the state.
And again, these are organizations that are sort of from the bottom up. They put a high premium on the membership. It's not just the leadership structure of those organizations that kind of drive the bus. It's really membership, and I agree with you. There's a lot of concerns being expressed, but again, part of that I think is being driven by the fact that at least it appears that the state of West Virginia, unlike a number of the prior years under then Governor Earl Ray Tomblin, there just was not the financial capacity to go to work on some of these problems.
You're right, Bill. There's a great deal of unrest out there among the teachers and the state employees, and lots of considerations being going on. Of course, the leaders in Christine and Dale and Josh have all advocated and talked that we need to develop a plan as we walk into this, which will involve meeting with legislators separately, perhaps a rally at the Capitol, and personal contacts with those delegates and senators.
No doubt about it. And again, it's very clear that we'll be seeing that throughout the course of the 60-day legislative session, which is currently underway at the State Capitol building in Charleston. So again, we have great guests coming up. Josh Sword, the state president of the West Virginia AFL-CIO, joining us here on the West Virginia Capitol Report. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break for our sponsors and be right back to the Capitol Report. So stay with us, everybody.
This is the West Virginia Capitol Report. Funding for the West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by Mark A. Hunt and Associates and by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia.
Today's Suddenlink tip: make moving easy. Packing and moving is hard, but Suddenlink can make it a little easier with one simple phone call. When you call Suddenlink, a representative will help you transfer all your services to your new address. Suddenlink will even send a technician to set everything up. One call, one connection, and one bill. Like I said, easy.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom McGee. It's dangerous out there. If you get hurt, shift the odds in your favor. Call Mark Hunt to get your just compensation and compensation for your injury. And if you have any criminal charge or if you get a DUI, be sure to call me at 304-642-6160.
The law firm of Mark Hunt and Associates, specializing in personal injury, DUI, and criminal defense. 304-344-1800.
From under the Gold Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host Dave Perry, and we're kind of reviewing today the opportunities presented last week when the AFL-CIO held their annual legislative conference in Charleston. They began with a press conference at the Cultural Center at the state capitol, and from there went into their annual meetings as part of their legislative conference during the regular session of the West Virginia legislature. And again, it was well attended, a lot of enthusiasm, a number of legislatures participating in the activities of that conference because, again, these are organizations that represent the interests of working families throughout the state of West Virginia. And Dave, we had the opportunity to talk to Josh Sword, who is the current president of the West Virginia AFL-CIO, which is really a diverse organization. They represent the construction trades, communications workers, just a lot of the affiliate members of the AFL-CIO. I think the AFT is a part of the umbrella, the AFL-CIO. So again, a very important organization that Josh is the head of. And he made several important points to us, one of which is he's beginning to detect and sense some grumblings, a bit of instability and some unrest among public employees, folks out in the field who get up every day, go to work to provide services to the state of West Virginia, whether it be on our highways, in our state parks, whether it be teachers in the classroom. But again, we've been in a situation for the past several years where we've just been unable to muster the types of financial resources necessary to address those needs. It's been a while since public employees have had a meaningful pay increase of any sorts. We've seen declining benefits through the PEIA, the insurance benefits that are made available to public employees. So Josh makes the point that this unrest may be a result of kind of kicking the can down the road, just have not addressed those things as time goes on, and maybe that day of reckoning is perhaps on the way.
Bill, I think we see that with the prisons as well, where they're unable to secure guards and public safety's at risk, and the state police, where we've not had a state police cadet class in some time, and as you've said, AFL-CIO represents all those affiliates.
No doubt about it. And again, in talking to Josh, he makes that point that a little bit of unrest out there as folks are, kind of waiting to see what solutions may come to pass here during the current legislative session. So let's run that clip on Josh Sword and what he has to say about this.
Well, there's a lot of unrest out in the field right now between public employees, and we're talking about teachers, school service personnel, other state employees like correctional officers, folks that have really felt the pain recently without getting any pay raises, with the cost of PEIA going up. So we're trying to figure out what we can do about it to help. Something's got to give. I mean, it's a serious situation out there, and we're trying to figure out exactly what the right approach is to address the situation. The governor, in his State of the State, offered or proposed a 1% pay raise. Look, we applaud him for opening that door, but we need to do much, much more. Our state employees are the lowest paid in the country. Our teachers are 49th in the country. Something has to be done. Priorities need to be made for public employees here in West Virginia. We're trying to draw attention to that, and I hope that press conference today helped.
Again, important points, Dave, that Josh made as far as satisfying unmet needs for public employees. And again, the legislature has to prioritize. And, how do we do that responsibly and still balance the state's budget kind of a lot of moving targets right now, and I think that's usually why we do the budget at the end of the legislative session. Is a lot of things that can be done between now and the end of the session that could ultimately impact and affect the final numbers in the state budget. So pulling all that together, that's the chore of the West Virginia legislature.
It's going to be a monumental task to do that, Bill, and clearly at the end of the day it's about money in the budget to address the needs of public employees and long-term multi-year solution for salaries and benefits for PEIA.
No doubt. And again, that term long-term, that it keeps coming up in the conversations we had. And again, some things you can kind of deal with a quick fix, but other things, I mean, if you raise salaries, if you improve benefits, you have to have some identified revenue stream that makes that sustainable, because decisions you make this year will affect budgets next year and all succeeding years. So again, that long-term strategy seems to be a repetitive theme, and I think that has a lot to do with part of the core element of the problem is PEIA, and folks are a little bit disappointed in sort of the fact that benefits are beginning to shrink in West Virginia.
And the point you make is quite clear, Bill, that a dedicated funding source, a dedicated resource has to be found to sustain what's done year by year or each year in terms of the budget.
Absolutely. And I suppose, Josh addressed that head on in the next clip. So let's roll that clip for Josh Sword.
Well, some of the plans would be, look, come up with a commitment to increase salaries throughout all public employment. I mean, it needs to be a long-term strategy with a dedicated revenue stream. The second thing, and equally important, is a plan to figure out how to offset the costs that go up each year within PEIA. PEIA is taking back more each year than what a potential 1% pay raise would be. So dedicated revenue for pay, dedicated revenue for PEIA is a must, and that's a starting point as we go down this trail.
Again, important observations by Josh. Finding our way to develop permanent solutions, long-term, that which is sustainable. That's important stuff. But Dave, in just talking to people that work in the public sector, the proposed 1% increase. The fact that it's been a number of years since folks have had the benefit of any salary adjustments. I think the sense I have, people are, generally appreciative of anything that's done, but I've heard a lot of disappointment that perhaps 1% just doesn't quite make it.
Fundamentally, they feel that 1% is just a slap in the face, Bill, and I think the bigger issue, though, with all of them versus salary in some of the meetings I've been in, is the PEIA becomes a bigger issue. While they're interested in the salary, their primary concern is the PEIA and the lack of services that's being rendered as a result that's happened over the years.
No doubt, and again, one of the big adjustments that was made when we sort of realized the extent of what was termed our OPEB liability, or other post-employment benefits. And it used to be that retirees could use and apply unused sick and annual leave benefits for paid-up health insurance, again creating a tremendous unfunded liability for the state of West Virginia. And part of the OPEB fix, I believe, was grandfathering in people that may have been employed during the time those commitments were made, but new folks coming in don't really have as enhanced benefit packages as some of the older employees that have traditionally been a part of the system.
And that talks to that stability that we have in terms of the teacher shortage of 727 teachers, and the stability of those teachers being willing to stay in the state and retire in the state. Quite often those benefits were given in lieu of pay raises.
Absolutely. Well, again, action is underway under the Capitol Dome as the West Virginia legislature grapples with these problems and tries to formulate solutions. And David, I don't mind being an armchair quarterback from time to time. We've both had the opportunity to to render service as members of the West Virginia Legislature, but it's not an easy thing to do, folks. But again, establishing priorities, always having your door open and listen to those persons that are impacted and affected by the bills considered and passed by the legislature, an important part of that. And again, the annual conference of the AFL-CIO held in Charleston is an important part of that dialogue and discussion going forward as we continue on with the regular session of the West Virginia Legislature. Again, it's the West Virginia Capitol Report show, and we like to thank our viewers for tuning us in each week as we bring you coverage on matters affecting your lives and the communities in which we live. On behalf of my broadcast partner, I'm Bill Laird, thanking you all for tuning us in. Have a good week and goodbye, everybody.